"You're being let go." That's what they said. No warning, no explanation that made sense. Just those 4 words and a manila envelope sliding across the table. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there numb while HR avoided my eyes and the office clock ticked loud enough to break me. Outside, I walked past desks I used to lead past co-workers who now looked straight through me like I was a ghost. The same people who once laughed at my jokes. The same people who asked for my help on tight deadlines. Now, not even a nod. I reached the parking lot and dropped the box of my belongings. Papers spilled everywhere: my framed certificate from the Chicago Business Women's Conference, a coffee mug with Boss Lady in gold cursive, and a half-used sticky notepad that read, "You got this." I stood there, staring at the pieces of my 6-year career scattered on concrete. That was 2 months ago. But let me tell you how I got there. It wasn't always like this. I used to love my job. Marketing lead at a rising firm midtown Chicago. I had a corner desk and a calendar full of campaigns. I worked with strategy data and creativity. I thrived under pressure. My name was on pitch decks. People respected me. I respected me. Then Jordan got promoted. He was young, cocky, and walked like the office owed him something. The kind of guy who complimented your lipstick a little too slow. Who joked about the way you bent to plug in your laptop. At first I ignored it. I'd been in corporate long enough to know how this usually goes: speak up and become the problem. Stay silent and just hope he gets bored, but it didn't stop. It got bolder. One Monday, I walked into the conference room for a pitch review. Jordan was already there alone. He leaned back in his chair, smiled, and said, "If I didn't know better, I'd think you wore that blouse just for me." That moment, it cracked something inside me. Still, I didn't say anything. Not then. But something changed. It was a Wednesday when I finally snapped. I was reviewing campaign analytics when I got an email from Jordan sent to me and 3 junior staffers. It said, "Let's make this client feel special. My name, work your charm. You know how to turn on the suite." I stared at that email for 15 minutes. Then I printed it. And for the first time in my career, I walked straight to HR. The woman behind the desk smiled politely as I laid out my file. Notes, emails, timestamps, even a post-it Jordan had left on my keyboard one morning. "Bet you wore those heels for me." She said they'd look into it. I left that office shaking, but weirdly relieved. I thought maybe I did the right thing. Maybe things would change. They did, but not the way I hoped. The next week, I was pulled from a major client pitch without explanation. The following week, Jordan made a snide remark during a meeting. "Some people here think everything is harassment now." People laughed, not loudly, just enough to gut me. Then came the cold shoulders. Dead-end tasks. My emails went unanswered. I'd been erased, but still on the payroll, until I wasn't. So yes, I got fired. But not for poor performance, not for policy violations. I got fired for telling the truth. And if you think that's where the story ends, trust me, it's just getting started. Because I didn't pack up and disappear. I fought back. And what happened next changed everything. I didn't realize how fast silence could turn into isolation until it happened to me. The day after I reported Jordan, the office felt off. People still smiled, but their smiles were tight. Conversations paused when I entered a room, and the warmth I once felt from my team, it was gone, replaced by a weird politeness forced stiff like they were afraid I'd accuse them of something too. That was when I first felt it. Oh God, I've just become the office pariah. But let me rewind, because the decision to report Jordan didn't come easy. It wasn't brave. It was desperate. The night before I spoke up, I sat on the floor of my apartment with a bottle of Merlot and a browser open to signs of workplace harassment. I kept telling myself maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe I misunderstood. But every bullet point hit like a punch. Unwanted comments about clothing. Check. Inappropriate jokes with sexual undertones. Check. Power imbalance used to manipulate or intimidate. Check. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being harassed. I barely slept that night. By morning, I had 3 options: pretend nothing happened, and slowly let the anxiety kill me. Quit and let him win. or report it and brace for hell. I chose the third. I wore my navy blazer that day, the one with the sharp shoulders that made me feel stronger than I was. Walked into HR with my file, and for 10 minutes, I told the truth. I thought that would be the hard part. It wasn't. The hard part was everything that came after. The first week, nothing happened. No follow-up. No confirmation, just silence. Then things started shifting. Small things. My biggest client was reassigned. I was no longer included in creative strategy meetings. I got forgotten on email chains. When I asked my manager about it, he gave me a half smile and said, "Just trying to redistribute the load. You've been under pressure. It wasn't concern. It was containment. I was being quietly moved to the edges where they could watch me or forget me." But what broke me wasn't the silence. It was the betrayal. One afternoon, I walked into the break room and found Jordan and two coworkers laughing. The second they saw me, they stopped. Jordan looked me right in the eye and said, "Careful, guys. We can't joke anymore. We've got a sensitive one around here." The room went quiet. I froze. My throat tightened. My hands felt like ice. And then someone laughed. It wasn't loud, just a chuckle. Nervous, maybe, but it was enough. Enough to let me know I was alone. I left my lunch on the table and walked straight to the ladies' room, locked the stall, sat down on the toilet fully clothed, and cried until my nose bled. I wasn't crying because I was weak. I was crying because I realized something horrible. I wasn't just being punished for speaking up. I was being erased for it. But here's the thing. You can't undo truth. Once it's out, it stays. And once a woman finds her voice, even if the world tries to silence it, that voice echoes. I started documenting everything. Every skipped meeting, every passive-aggressive comment, every random reassignment. I printed emails, kept notes, logged times and dates. I created a timeline so tight it could hold up in court, because something in my gut whispered, "They're not going to fix this. They're going to fire you. And if they did, I'd be ready." The most painful part wasn't losing respect, it was losing my place. For years, that office had been my second home. Those people, my second family. We shared deadlines, birthday cake, client wins, even inside jokes on Slack. Now I was radioactive. But I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. And I didn't back down, because I knew if I let them break me, it wouldn't just be my loss. It would be a warning to every woman watching in silence. Don't speak up. Look what happened to her. Well, let them look. I was just getting started. It didn't come in a dramatic showdown. There was no raised voice, no final confrontation. Just a quiet knock on my office door and a soft, rehearsed line, "Can you come with me for a moment?" I knew. The walk down the hall felt like a funeral procession. My heels clicked on the tile louder than usual. Every step echoed. I passed framed photos of company events I helped organize. Now they felt like mockery. Inside HR, it was all protocol. Smiles without warmth. Apologies without meaning. Paperwork with no heart. They said words like restructuring and budget alignment, but we all knew what this was. This was retaliation, wrapped in polite corporate language. 2 weeks before that meeting, I received my final performance review. It was the lowest I'd ever gotten. No explanation, no specific feedback, just vague phrases like lack of team synergy and recent changes in attitude. It was obvious. They weren't documenting my performance. They were documenting their escape plan. I remember sitting on the train ride home that night, gripping the folder in my lap, too stunned to even cry. The woman next to me asked if I was okay. I said yes, but I wasn't. I was unraveling quietly, privately. 6 years of commitment erased with a signature. It didn't matter that I had brought in the firm's biggest client 3 months ago. It didn't matter that I had mentored every junior associate on my team. It didn't matter that I once stayed until 1 a.m. to finish a pitch deck no one else wanted to touch. None of that mattered now. I was disposable. The next morning, I stayed in bed until noon. I stared at the ceiling, playing the whole thing over in my mind like a slow-motion movie. The comments, the report, the slow freeze-out, the silence, the final meeting. What hurt most wasn't losing the job. It was realizing that every time I thought they were figuring it out, they were just building their case to get rid of me. And I'd handed them the nails. But grief is a funny thing. It can flatten you, or sharpen you. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and searched for employment lawyers in Chicago. I didn't even think I just acted. Something inside me had shifted. They took my job, but they weren't going to take my dignity. I scheduled 3 consultations that week. By Friday, I had legal representation. And when I told him everything, when I laid out the emails, the timeline, the HR meetings, he looked at me and said, "You have a case, a strong one." For the first time in weeks, I felt my spine straighten. Filing a lawsuit against your former employer isn't empowering at first. It's terrifying. You question everything. What if no one believes me? What if they bury me in legal fees? What if I lose? But you do it anyway. Because silence is worse. Because every night you try to sleep, that voice in your head whispers, "You let them do this to you." And you let them get away with it. So you fight, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. I won't pretend it was easy. My savings account started draining. I stopped going out with friends. I stopped shopping. I clipped coupons. I paused my gym membership. I even canceled my Netflix. But I didn't cancel the fight. And every day I didn't back down, I rebuilt a little piece of myself. I wasn't just chasing justice. I was reclaiming the woman they tried to silence. The woman who had value. The woman who deserved better. When people hear this story, they often ask, "Was it worth it?" And I always say the same thing. They took my job, but they didn't take my voice. And now, that voice is just getting louder. They say going up against a corporation is like walking into a storm barefoot. They're right. The first letter from their legal team was 19 pages long. I still remember the sound the envelope made when it dropped onto my kitchen table. Heavy, final, intimidating. They wanted to scare me. Instead, they gave me fuel. My lawyer David was calm but honest. "They'll drag this out. They'll try to bury you in paperwork. But you've got receipts and you've got truth." That's power. So we filed the lawsuit wrongful termination, retaliation for reporting harassment, emotional distress. I was officially taking them to court, and that's when the real fight began. Depositions felt like interrogations. They brought in a team 3 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than my rent. They tried to twist everything, asked if I'd ever laughed at Jordan's jokes, asked what I wore to work, asked if I had any personal conflicts with my colleagues. It was humiliating. They weren't looking for facts. They were looking for cracks. But I held the line. Every question I answered with the truth. Every email, every memo, every timestamp, I had it all. And I wasn't backing down. One night, after a particularly brutal session, I broke down in the bathtub. Fully clothed, water running cold. I sat there for over an hour. Not because I was weak, but because I was tired. Tired of reliving everything. Tired of being questioned, judged, dissected. Tired of carrying the weight of proving what should have never happened. That's when I realized something hard but true justice doesn't come easy. You don't get it by being quiet, you get it by enduring. The months dragged on, 6, then 9. The company filed motions to dismiss. We countered. They offered a settlement, one that came with an NDA and a no-fault clause. Basically, take the money and pretend this never happened. It was tempting. I was living on savings. I'd taken freelance work just to keep the lights on. I was clipping coupons and rationing groceries. There were nights I didn't eat dinner, just tea. But I looked at that settlement offer and thought, what about the next woman? The one sitting in that office now afraid to speak up. The one who'll get the same smirk, the same email, the same silence from HR. If I take this hush money, what message does that send her? So I said no. And just like that, we were heading to trial. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. There were no dramatic speeches, no banging gavels, just paperwork and evidence and truth spoken into microphones. I sat on the witness stand and told my story, not with fire, but with clarity. I told them about the emails, the comments, the retaliation, the day I got fired. And when the defense tried to paint me as emotional, bitter, difficult, I didn't flinch. Because I knew who I was. I was the woman who stood up. and now I was the woman who would be heard. After closing arguments, I went home and waited. 3 days. 3 agonizing days. When the call finally came, I was in my pajamas folding laundry. My hands were shaking. David's voice came through the phone. We won. I dropped the shirt I was holding, sat down on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in nearly a year, I exhaled. Not because it was over, but because I made it through. The court awarded damages for lost wages and emotional distress. But that wasn't the victory. The victory was every woman who messaged me after. Strangers, co-workers, even people still at the company. They wrote, "You gave me courage. I've been quiet for years. Not anymore. You made me feel seen. That was the real win. Let me tell you something no one else will. Standing up might cost you. It might shake your world, test your strength, break your heart. But it will never diminish your worth." I walked into that courtroom afraid. I walked out as a woman who knew her value and made the world recognize it too. I used to think power came from titles, paychecks, and how many people answered your emails. Now I know it comes from something quieter. It comes from knowing you spoke the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. It comes from not shrinking, even when the room tries to erase you. It comes from walking through hell and coming out whole. After the verdict, there was no parade. No one threw confetti. The company didn't apologize, not really. Their statement was dry, legal, something about reaching a resolution. But I didn't need their apology anymore. I had something better. Vindication and peace. Not because justice is perfect, but because I no longer carried the weight of silence. The first time I walked past that old office building again, it was by accident. I was on my way to a doctor's appointment. My heart stuttered when I saw the glass doors. For a second, I almost crossed the street, but I didn't. I slowed down. I looked straight through the front window, and I smiled. Not because I missed it, not because I was bitter, but because I survived it. And I was proud. A few months later, I gave my first public talk. It was a women's leadership brunch at a hotel downtown. I stood in front of 120 women HR reps, managers, interns, assistants, some who had faces just like mine the day I sent that first email. Scared, exhausted, hopeful. I told them my story, start to finish. No softening the truth. I talked about the jokes, the retaliation, the firing, the lawsuit, the nights I cried on my bathroom floor. I talked about what it costs to speak up and what it gives you back. When I finished, the room was quiet. And then one woman stood up. She was in her 50s, gray streak in her bun, glasses trembling in her hand. She said, "I've been silent for 18 years. I'm not going to be anymore." That's when I knew. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who'd been told to smile and sit still. Since then, I've made it my mission to use what happened for good. I started volunteering with a local nonprofit that supports women facing workplace harassment. I help review their documents, prep them for HR meetings, give them language confidence proof that they're not alone. I also mentor women entering corporate spaces. I tell them, you can be strong without being silent. You can be respected without being small, and if no one else is clapping for them, I will. But don't get me wrong, healing is messy. There are still days I question myself, still moments when I wake up and remember that feeling of being walked out with a cardboard box like a thief. But then I remind myself, they didn't fire me because I was wrong. They fired me because I was right. And that's something no title, paycheck, or suit can ever take from me. If you're watching this and something inside you is shaking right now, please hear me. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You are not overreacting. You're seeing the truth. And even if your voice trembles, use it. Document everything. Find support. Speak up. Don't let fear steal your power. Don't let silence become your prison. The world needs women who refuse to sit quietly through disrespect. You're not alone, and your story matters more than you know. If this story resonated with you, please don't scroll away. Like this video if you believe in standing up for what's right. Share it with someone who needs strength today. Comment below if you've ever felt silenced, and let's build a space where truth gets louder. Subscribe for more stories like this because you deserve to feel seen, heard, and empowered. Together, we're not just surviving the silence. We're breaking it.